the whole evening, and then the speakers that we've got. So this is a speakeasy. It's a Free Speech Union speakeasy. We've got 3 speakers. We've got Denise Fahmy, Sean Corby, and Toby Young, who I'll tell you a little bit about each of them in a second. The way it'll work is that I'm going to just sort of interview all 3 of them to start with, and find out particularly the stories of Sean and Denise. Some of you will know a little bit about their stories, other people may know nothing. So I'll get them to explain why they're here and why they're we're friends of theirs and they're friends of ours. And then we'll have a break. We'll have an interval at about 8 o'clock so you can go and get another drink. And then we'll come back and do a Q&A after that. We've got loads of time for Q&A, so don't worry that you won't have a chance to ask them questions, to say what you want to say. I think what I'll do in the Q&A, though, is if we start with straightforward questions to Denise and Sean in particular, and also to Toby, and then we can go into your general kind of comments on the kinds of themes that have come up through the course of the evening. So if you can just if you've got particular questions that are short, try and ask those at the beginning of the Q&A. That'll be really good. So, let's put my glasses on for this bit. So, did I introduce myself? Probably didn't. So I'm sorry. I'm Jan McVarish. I'm the Education and Events Director of the Free Speech Union. And we organise these events around the country. We've just come from Belfast. We were in Belfast last weekend where we did our first Northern Ireland speakeasy. And then we're off to Cambridge. We've got numerous events organised in London. We're going to Glasgow. We just try to go everywhere where there's kind of members that can congregate and meet each other. And then also these events are open to the public. So we're very keen for people to come and find out more about the Free Speech Union and what we do. And also to raise with us the kinds of issues that people are experiencing around free speech. So these events are an opportunity to do that. I want to introduce, first of all, I'll introduce Denise. So Denise has 30 years experience in arts administration and development. She specialises in the visual arts, and for the past 15 years worked for Arts Council England as a relationship manager in the north of England. She has now set up an organisation called Freedom in the Arts, which there's a big story to tell in between those 2 stages in Denise's recent career. So I'm not going to tell you more about Denise's story because I'm going to ask her to tell us that. And the same with Sean. So Sean is a musician who's recorded and performed with the likes of Jar Wobble, Gregory Isaacs, Manic Street Preachers, Misha Paris, and the Jazz Warriors. And he also has worked as a conciliator for ACAS, which is what he's going to talk about at the end of that relationship this evening. Sean was going to very kindly play a set for us. Unfortunately, he has got a dental problem, which, as you imagine, if you play the trumpet, you really don't want to be playing it if you've got any problem at all going on with your teeth. So he's very sorry to not be able to play for us, but his music was playing earlier, and we'll play it again during the interval. And then we've got Toby Young, who many of you will probably recognise. Toby is the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. And if you don't know what we do, which I'm assuming you all do because you're here, but we're a non-partisan mass membership public interest body. And what we do really rather well, I think, is stand up for the free speech rights of our members and other people, in fact, because we campaign, we lobby, we raise awareness of free speech issues more generally. Toby co-founded the West London Free School and is the author of 4 books, the best known of which is How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. At the moment, he seems to be winning friends and influencing people, so he seems to be reversing that particular trajectory. He's also an associate editor of The Spectator, and he's written a weekly column there since 1998, and he also runs a blog, which many of you will know, called Daily Skeptic, that's very popular and has received over 40 million page views. In fact, it's probably more than that now, because that was an old figure. So, first of all, I'm going to just to say that we are filming tonight. We do always film our events. The audience is not directly in shot, so you may be filmed from the back. If you've got a problem with that, let me know afterwards, and we can make sure that you're not in any video that goes public, because we understand not everybody is out, as the language people use to describe the situation at the current moment. But generally speaking, we put the full video of the evening out on our YouTube channel. Okay, right. So first of all, I wanted to just ask Denise and then Sean, if you can just outline to us, for those of us who don't know your story, what was it that happened in your workplace that created a free speech problem for you? You go first, Denise. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I worked at Arts Council England. I would quite like to just describe Arts Council England first, just to give you a sense of the organisation. It's a very well-respected organisation. It was established after the Second World War, so over 75 years old. And it's the main funder of the arts in England. There's a similar in Wales, in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, similar bodies. And it distributes taxes and good causes money drawn from the National Lottery. And it mainly goes through, in order to secure arts funding, it goes through an application process. And that was my job, really, to support people to make applications for arts projects in the north of England, mainly in Yorkshire, but across the north, through National Lottery resources. So I did that for pretty much the same job for 15 years at the Arts Council. And I really loved it, actually, and it was a very privileged position to be in, because you got to meet really interesting artists, see fantastic work, and be involved in realising some really exciting projects. So it was a very progressive organisation, very family-friendly organisation, great colleagues. So from my point of view, it was the perfect job, really, and I was very lucky to have it. Having been there for that length of time, I knew everyone very well. I had lots of very close friends working there. And I was also the deputy chair of the trade union there, which was Unite. So I had a great job, great colleagues, knew all the goss, knew every policy inside out, was in many ways in a very comfortable place. And what happened was that gradually the organisation and the colleagues became more and more absorbed in the kind of notion of identity, and that began to take over the kind of workplace culture, and it just began to be a little bit more uncomfortable, really. And I began to worry that there was issues around how we were collecting data as an organisation. Initially, was what I was looking at. Like, there was conflation between sex and gender. There was a long kind of move away from the categories of the Equality Act that we know and what guides legal cases. So I began to think, well, this is all a bit odd. How did that come about? And I was also concerned that there was kind of growing power in staff groups that were bringing up lots of little issues and actually creating a lot of problems that weren't either coming through the union or coming through management. So there was a lot of issues bubbling along all the time. What eventually ended up happening, I kept raising that with management, those kind of broader issues. Eventually, there was a moment when an organisation, relatively new charity called LGB Alliance, a lot of you will have heard of them because they've become controversial because they're single-sex. How do you call it? Their policy is based on sexual orientation, is based on sex, and so they only support lesbian, gay, and bisexual interests, and as a charity, that's what they campaign on. Anyway, they made an application to another organisation, but the funding came through the Arts Council for a very small grant to make a film about gay men's lives as part of the Jubilee celebrations. So they wanted to talk about the things that gay men had achieved during the reign of the then Queen. And it was a really simple application for £10,000. And they ended up realising that film. It was a film they wanted to make, and it was a 25-minute documentary, and it was a bit of a feel-good film, really. You know, it was really positive about all the things that have been achieved by those men in whatever it is, 40 years, or the Queen's reign. So they were given the grant by a devolved organisation called a Community Foundation in London. That led to a lot of unhappiness within my organisation, and many members of staff were very upset about it because they didn't think that LGB Alliance should have access to public resources. I assume that was their complaint. And so there ended up being a huge staff meeting to discuss this one grant. And for an organisation that distributed nearly £1 billion that year, we were talking about a grant of £10,000. That has never happened in the 15 years that I've been at the Arts Council. That we had a full organisational meeting to talk about one tiny grant.
This is all staff?
All staff.
Wow. How many staff?
Well, there was about 650 to 700 staff, but
on a Zoom call?
400 plus staff came to discuss one grant of £10,000. Now, you might think that's a bit of a waste of taxpayers' money because that meeting will have cost more than the grant. But leaving that aside...
Just as well there weren't sandwiches.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we kind of knew there was going to be... I felt, this is going to be a heavy meeting. But I assumed it was going to be conducted in a kind of place of sitting on the fence, really. So it was led by our deputy director, and he made it very, very clear at the beginning of the meeting that he didn't think that the LGB Alliance should have been funded, and he was very critical of the organisation. And I was really shocked because we were a public body. I still use the term we, it's ridiculous. They are a public body. Everybody is entitled to apply for funding. If it meets the criteria, that's it. It's eligible for funding. It doesn't matter who people are, what their background. It's public funding. So I was very shocked to hear an organisation slandered in front of 400 people, which I would see as a public meeting. I don't see that as a private staff meeting, and it wouldn't have happened anyway in a private staff meeting. So I objected at that meeting. I mean, it was all online. So I said, I think you're mistaken about the LGB Alliance. And it got it didn't get ugly, but it became quite a difficult meeting, and there was comments made. Eventually that led to, and that meeting lasted about 40 minutes. And the organisation kind of went into a bit of turmoil after that. There was kind of meltdown. Luckily it was Easter. So when I came back from the Easter break, some staff had got together and decided to launch an online petition against gender-critical, and gender-critical people are people that believe that sex can't be changed, that work at the Arts Council. And the petition was online for about 30 hours, and it collected about 150 names. When I say online, it was on our internal staff intranet. So it went to all members of staff, and really everybody just stopped working and started messing about with this petition. And you could see it all in real live time. You could see people moving around inside this petition. It was really horrendous. And people started to make more and more ridiculous and derogatory comments. And so I will read you one of them. It says, it's quite clear that there are members of our own organisation who are happy to be vocally anti-trans and gender-critical. We shouldn't have to put up with this anymore than we would racist or sexist behaviour. It's time to stamp out bigotry in the Arts Council. It's clear that there's been a lack of condemnation of a transphobic organisation, and no action is being taken against the so-called gender-critical amongst us. There is ongoing racism. There's an ongoing problem of racism in our ranks that needs to be challenged. This cancer needs to be removed from our organisation. And this comment's made with no irony intended. Hatred of others for their differences should not be tolerated. I ask you. And I mean, I knew my colleagues, I knew who was writing this. They signed their names. I know those individuals, people I've worked with for 15 years, people I've helped as a trade union rep over the years.